This podcast is part of the Michigan Sports and Entertainment Podcast Network. Go to michigansportsandentertainment.com for more great podcasts.
Welcome to MSE Countdown with your host, David Rosenberg and Chase Sussex. The countdown starts now.
We are back, everybody. Welcome to the Michigan Sports and Entertainment Countdown. I'm your host, David Rosenberg. I'm here with Chase Sussex. Chase, what's up?
What's going on, everybody?
So, we got kind of a lot to talk about this week. It's a slow week as summers go when the Tigers are not doing especially well, so we'll do what we can. But the biggest story we have is, of course, the Michigan-Vanderbilt series. So, let's get it going. The countdown starts now. Our first story, the Michigan Wolverines unfortunately lost in the College World Series finals to the Vanderbilt Commodores. Chase, I know we were both watching most of the series. I actually missed the last game. I know you you tuned into that. So what did you think about the final game? And then we'll go over the whole series.
I think the final game was a little disappointing in terms of the outcome, but in reality, I think, it was definitely fun to see Michigan in that final, in the College World Series, considering they were one of the last four teams in the tournament. Everyone didn't, even see them making out of the regionals, and they ended up making it to the College World Series. That was such an exciting team to watch, and I personally enjoyed it, even though the outcome wasn't what we expected or what we wanted. But it's tough. That kind of situation is never easy, especially to be on a losing end after winning the first game and having so much hope. But it's like I said, that was such a special team. I don't expect that team to be, they'll definitely be around they'll definitely be back to a College World Series in the near future, which is good. They definitely have a lot of, they have a bright future. A lot of those guys going to the MLB now. Good luck to them in their career. I know guys like Tommy Henry and Jimmy Kerr will no longer play at Michigan next season, but they still have a really good roster. They still got a lot of bright spots in that team, and Eric Bakich is a spectacular coach, and I think he'll lead them back to the College World Series in the next couple seasons, if not next season.
I caught most of what you said, Chase. I got some rain coming in, so I was going to make sure that all my windows were shut. I hope the mic's not picking that up. Can you hear it?
No, you're good.
All right, cool. You got to make sure with these things. You know how much trouble we have with these recordings. But, yeah, no, your main point, which is kind of what you led off with, is absolutely correct. It was disappointing. For Michigan Wolverine fans, this was an unexpected run, but those are often the ones that you fall in love with the most. And I know that the entire team was full of such great characters, like every person on the team seemed like they were an individual and they stood out, and you got to know them if you didn't already as the tournament went on. So to see them lose 8-2 in the final game of the College World Series, the last college baseball game to be played this season, is heartbreaking, to be honest. But you have to remember that, like you said, this was not expected, and I know you and I are in several of the same group chats and several of the same Twitter communities, if you want to call them that. And there was a whole lot of talk about, they failed, they really messed this up. Did you hear a lot of that? Because, frankly, that angered me,
I actually didn't hear a whole lot of that, but, that's just how it is. A lot of what I was seeing, though, was positive, but there probably were negative people out there who said, this is a failure. And that's what happens. A lot of people said that after Michigan lost in the not Vanderbilt in basketball to Villanova, same letter, so I got a little confused there, but but everyone said the season was such a bust, but they lost in the in the national championship. I don't think a national championship loss after people don't expect national championship is a failed season or a bust season by any means.
Exactly, and that's what I was trying to say, is that you have to keep it, you have to see the bigger picture here, that this was not expected. They did have the lowest odds of anyone coming into the, tournament. They were one of the last four in. It just was not something that was supposed to happen. And as much as underdog and Cinderella stories are awesome, they don't always come to fruition. And you have to remember that we got a lot of excitement as fans that we probably shouldn't have gotten. So, hats off to this team ultimately. And like you said, we're going to remember those names. Tommy Henry, I'm sure he's going to do big things, being drafted and such. But that's just the way it goes sometimes. Unfortunately, I couldn't catch that third game because it happened to fall on my birthday. I was hoping that they would wrap things up in a game 2 of that game, but the Commodores took that one 4-1 behind an impressive performance by Rocker. What'd you think of this kid? He was absolutely incredible. I'm pretty sure he won MVP of the College World Series. He held Michigan down for 6 1/3, and then the closer came in and got a 2 and how many outs? 8 out save, which is ridiculous, but that essentially is what it was. But Rocker, man, that kid, he was impressive.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, Kumar Rocker is going to be one of the, he's going to be a really talented player when it comes to college baseball. I know he only pitched twice during the entire College World Series, but, when you go out there against Duke, Duke's not necessarily a great program, but, to go out there and throw 19 strikeouts and, throw a no-hitter, the kid deserves some rest after that. And
In the postseason.
Yeah. In the postseason, yeah. But, it's definitely interesting. I think the way Vanderbilt played it, the way they played their cards in the College World Series is really smart. They chose not to pitch him in the first game. I think picking him for the second game was perfect. I just that was you throw your ace in the first game. That's start. You have a strong pitcher, and you have a really reliable pitcher in Kumar Rocker available for the second game.
Yep.
And the positioning there is just really, really good. Because if obviously he puts you in a position to win a game and force a game 3, but if you win your first game, he makes it hard for them to get a win in game 2 as well. So I just think it was a smart overall where they did in terms of the rotation. Because I feel like if Walker first, Michigan might have been able to do one of those things where they win game 2 and game 3, or if they somehow were able to hit off of, I don't really think, Vanderbilt's other pitcher they pitched in the first game, Hickman, if I'm not mistaken, I don't think he would have been able to stop.
Yeah, it was definitely some smart strategic planning by the Vanderbilt coaching staff, That comes with the experience of being in the College World Series. I believe they've made it to the College World Series 4 times since 2011, and they won it in 2014, and again, obviously this year. And they've had, I think, something like 13 or 14 draft picks, high, maybe first-round draft picks, but at least high-round draft picks in the past few years since the MLB. They have turned into a magnificent program, and it would be like playing Duke in the March Madness final, because Krzyzewski has so much experience being in those high pressure games that maybe a team on a Cinderella run wouldn't exactly know how to plan for the moments, right? And Vanderbilt knew exactly what they were doing, throwing Rocker second. So good job. what do you say other than great? So.
So that's what I mean. Tim Corbin, was brought in. If you don't know who Tim Corbin is, he actually coached alongside Eric Backett at I believe it was Clemson, if I'm not mistaken. And those two have known each other for a while, and Corbin is sort of the protege. Or no, I got it sort of wrong. He's the mentor of Eric Backett. It was sort of a mentor-mentee type game. But like you were mentioning, Vanderbilt had some good. They MLB players like Dansby Swanson, former Tiger David Price, Mike Minor, some of these guys like this, who went to Vanderbilt and had a lot of success in the MLB. These guys are, Vanderbilt has created a lot of draft picks, and they're a great program. They're not, for sports.
Exactly.
Really
And you brought up that mentor-mentee thing that was going on with Bakich, and it was kind of set up, and they were kind of jokey, like, oh, it's not Vanderbilt baseball without Coach Bakich and stuff like that. But ultimately, the student hasn't defeated the master just yet. So Michigan will build on this, no doubt. They'll have expectations now to be a power college baseball program, which is not something they've been necessarily in the past. We talked about in the last episode that their last championship came in like the 60s or something.
I think so. I mean, I think it was 62 or I can't remember off the top of my head. It was either 62 or 64. If you remember, actually, I think it was Jimmy Kerr's grandfather who played in that. Or no, he played back in the 40s. I can't remember. I know Jimmy Kerr's.
But it's been a long time since Michigan baseball has been
relevant,
relevant, and it's not like another Big Ten team's been relevant in college baseball for a long time. So hopefully this kind of jumpstarts the entire conference, because obviously they are talked about constantly when it comes to football, and they get enough play for basketball. They're obviously not, some of the other teams like a Duke or a North Carolina, but being a college baseball school would make them a more complete program. Michigan is one of the best universities academically and, athletically in the country. So adding this to their long list on their resume would be absolutely great for the program. So hopefully this can keep up, and I have nothing but praise for this team as we wrap up this college baseball season.
Absolutely.
All right. Our second story tonight, we're going to talk about the Detroit Pistons. We're kind of going to go over the entire offseason that's happened. Chase, have you been keeping up with basketball? I know you're not that much of a baseball guy, but you like basketball?
I'm not a big basketball guy either, at least for Pistons, but I did hear about I gotta pick up my my game on some of those other for sure. I heard about the
I'm gonna replace you with Dustin.
I definitely did see the Derrick Rose signing that happened today. I think that was probably the biggest thing that happened. Decline with the Pistons, but I did hear about that. That's
Derrick Rose is definitely the biggest news to come in. It's actually, the first day, I think that we're recording on the 30th. So they've only been allowed to negotiate with teams for a few hours. So, they've agreed in principle, and there's kind of that little moratorium period for a week where they can't actually sign. If you remember a couple off seasons ago, DeAndre Jordan in the Clippers, he was going to sign, I think, with the Mavericks, and they ended up like barricading him in and like begging him to stay as teammates or something. So a lot can change, but I don't expect it to. Derrick Rose was looking for someone to give him a 2-year contract for anywhere between $15, $16 million. The Pistons were that team. They gave him 2 years, $15 million, which, if you ask me, $7.5 million for a player like Derrick Rose is fine. I'm cool with it. It doesn't eat too much into the Pistons cap space. There's a lot else going on today in the NBA, and the Pistons aren't expected to be immediate contenders, but this does strengthen the team and build them in the direction that they want to go. So I really liked this, and the Rose signing, he'll put pen to paper on July 6th, so we got about a week to go, but that's definitely the biggest news coming out of the Pistons this offseason. What do you think about that Rose signing?
I think it's great. Honestly, they fill a player, a position of need with a great player. I think an underrated player last season in Derrick Rose. I think a lot of people don't really know what Derrick Rose necessarily brings to the table. I think it's a great signing for them. They did it relatively cheap too. It's a $15 million deal for 2 years, which I think is spectacular. If you looked at some of the other, point guard signings, we saw a bunch of crazy signings today. And we'll break those down in, maybe and possibly a future episode, but
we can talk about some of them now. We can
talk about some of them.
Kevin Durant is going to the Nets, and Kyrie Irving, I think, is what I've heard.
I don't think Kyrie Irving has officially made it. Has officially
Neither is
signed
Kevin
yet.
Durant. He'll be making his announcement probably while we're recording this podcast. But ESPN's Adrian Wojnarowski's already reported that he's intended to sign with the Brooklyn Nets, and I've heard elsewhere that it's supposed to be a clean sweep for the Nets, and they'll be getting, I think, DeAndre Jordan and Kyrie Irving, but don't hold me to those last two. But, back to the Rose signing, you talked about people don't really know what they're getting out of this guy. The first thing you think of Derrick Rose when you say his name is one of two things. It's MVP or what could have been, because he was incredible. You remember his MVP years. I mean, you were quite young, but you remember his he was just simply the best player in the NBA at the same time LeBron was trying to be the best player in the NBA. So if that gives you an idea of how good he can be, there's that. But then, of course, he destroyed his knees. I think he tore his ACL multiple times trying to recover, and he's certainly dropped off. 2011, 2012, he didn't play at all. 13, he only played 10 games, and in 14, he played 51. He left Chicago after the 2015 season and went to New York, I believe, in a trade. Played in Cleveland and then Minnesota, where he got hurt again. But he was beloved. They loved him in the locker room, and it's about limiting his minutes. He'll be a veteran presence in a locker room that needs a guy who's tough but can teach them a thing or two, which is exactly who Derrick Rose is. Last season he played 51 games, averaged 27 minutes, 18 points, shot 48% on 3 rebounds and 4 assists. That's a solid point guard. I know we have Reggie Jackson, but, there's something to be worked out there. Derrick Rose is definitely a good addition to this team.
Absolutely. I mean, if you look at some of the other, acquisitions the Pistons have made, I think the move definitely makes sense. I know they ended up not picking up Glenn Robinson III's option, if I'm not mistaken. But
they declined his team option, so it was up to the team option. And obviously that kind of makes sense. We tweeted out, on at MSE Countdown, what do you think about this when they did decline the Glenn Robinson option? Of course, there were rumors of the Derrick Rose move at the time, and then of course it was confirmed today. So it kind of makes sense. You're losing one guy and bringing in another $4.2 million because you got to pay a guy $7.5. You got to clear cap somehow, and Glenn Robinson is just not in the plans. He's an okay player. I like him. He's especially fun in 2K, but I just don't think that he was in the plan. So that's just a team thing, and of course, the draft. Right? You want to try and pronounce those names?
Yeah, I'll take a crack at it this week since you you tried to get it last week. We got, obviously they drafted, I think, deals in the draft, in my opinion, and Sekou Doumbouya. He looked really good. Another player I was looking at who tested really well in the combine was Jordan Bone. And he drafted in the second, in the late second round. And then it was Servidis, I think is how you say his name. That's my best bet on him, but for sure, yeah, I think I got it pretty good. But it's definitely interesting. I think the Pistons are doing a really good job in building the team. I know they're still confident Drummond and Blake will bring success to this team, and I think that's kind of their role going forward. I think it'll be really good. I mean, I think the trio of Blake Griffin, Andre Drummond, and Derrick Rose next season will be insane.
It's a poor man's big three, but I definitely see what you're talking about. And, the 3 guys that you just named, there's a plan, right? Like, they aren't just doing things willy-nilly. I know people were very upset when Doumbouya got picked first, but that's not, people are always going to get upset. We talk about this nonstop. And it's clear that, they're filling holes and they're filling needs. They didn't draft a guard because they had Derrick Rose in their sights. So things are working out. Of course, the addition of Tony Snell along with that 30th pick that they ended up trading, and then they got into all of those second-round trades during the draft that people went up in arms about too. But Tony Snell's a good player too. What do you got on him? He can shoot the three. Anything else?
Tony Snell actually had a really big down year last year, but I mean, dude's got a good, he's got a good field goal percentage. His 3-point percentage is really good. He didn't really put up points last season in Milwaukee. But I think, he's a good acquisition. He's a good depth, signing.
Don't lie to the people. Tell them how you feel. We talked about this before we started recording, and you found a quote that told you exactly what you think you should need to know about Tony Snell. What did they say about this being the best year since when?
Yeah, so they said that Tony Snell this offseason, or this last season with the Bucks, it was his worst year since 2015 with the Bulls in Chicago. They said his stats, that's the last time his stats were that low, which is not good. So it definitely doesn't look like a great signing for the Pistons. I don't really think it's necessarily, it's whatever. I mean, they ended up getting a lot. I mean, they traded John Lure and for
Lure's the other
a
big
first
one.
Well, I mean, so they pick up his contract. They pick up they pick up that contract,
but Lure's contract was worse.
Yeah, Lure's contract was worse. So I think they just traded bad contracts, and they ended up getting a pick out of it as well. So
here's the thing about that quote that you just read. It being his worst year since 2015 means 2016 and 17 were both good, or at least better, and showed improvement, right? So something happened, and he did. I think he was playing shooting guard for a bit, and then he moved to small forward on the Bucks, which he wasn't starting as many games because there's a better small forward on the Bucks. You can figure out who that is if you don't know who I'm talking about, but that's just how it goes. So I think him getting a role, I read something that it feels good to feel wanted by a team. So obviously there was some unrest, more than just the contract issues with Tony Snell and the Milwaukee Bucks. So I think moving on is a good thing for Tony Snell, and hopefully it's a good thing for the Pistons, and that he can get back to those 2016 and 2017 and not those the 2015 and 2019 or 18 years. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I completely understand. I mean, he's got some room to grow. I don't necessarily know what his role will be necessarily next season with the Pistons, but I'm interested to see how he'll use him. I'm sure he'll come off the bench, or, I'm sure they'll use him in some capacity next season. So I'm excited to see kind of what they decide to do with them and see if he ends up putting up points to the Pistons, because I think overall they ended up getting Servidus out of it. So I don't really think there's a huge issue with that. I think you pick up, acquire a draft pick and get a player and really get rid of one of your contracts, one of your big looming contracts on the team. So overall, I can't say it was a terrible trade. You're not really getting the best player, but John Lure. So
yeah, no, exactly. And they're making effective use of their money too, right? Currently, I believe when I checked that the Pistons have 12 people on the roster, so they need about 2 more, and they have about $5.2 million left in the salary cap. They're not going over anything. They're not eating into too much. They have obviously big contracts with Griffin and Drummond, but you live with that, and you work around it. They're obviously not going to have great salary cap space until 2021, but they're making effective use of their money. I think they still have somewhere between $5 and $6 million left to spend. They'll probably use that on a center to back up Drummond, and then fill in wherever they need to. So I say it's a pretty good offseason so far for the Detroit Pistons. It's not obviously the Brooklyn Nets offseason, which is fantastic, or the Lakers offseason, which has been pretty good so far and might get better, because I'm hearing that Kawhi Leonard is really excited about the prospect of joining the Lakers and playing with LeBron. So we'll see how that goes. But, I give the Pistons offseason, at worst a B so far.
I mean, they've had a really good offseason. I think a B is a solid grade there. I think drafted pretty well, and the free agent acquisitions. I think their score was definitely bumped up. Maybe I would say maybe up to like a B plus with the Derrick Rose signing. But overall, yeah, I would say like a B plus is a good rating for the Pistons offseason so far.
Yeah, for sure. All right, I think that wraps things up on the Pistons. Are there any more free agent signings, rumbling things that you want to talk about before we move on outside of the Pistons?
I don't think so, but
Obviously, we got the big ones out of the way. All right. Our third story tonight is the Detroit Tigers. They're still not going a lot with the Tigers. They're not a good team. They won 5 games in the month of June because the month of June is now over. They lost today to the Nationals 2-1 against Max Scherzer. Miguel Cabrera actually wasn't in the lineup today, which it's always funny because you have one of the best hitters on the planet and one of the best pitchers on the planet. Or at least Cabrera was one of the best hitters on the planet years ago. He's still got a good 300 average, but he's not hitting with as much power as he used to. But they used to be teammates, so you don't get to do anything unless it's in practice, and they're never going to let them throw at each other, real life. So you got a guy like Cabrera sitting out. That's a little bit of fun, kind of being had. And this is coming in. Heat finalizing a sign and trade with 76ers to acquire Jimmy Butler. So I spoke too soon. The Heat will be getting Jimmy Butler. That reminds me of a tweet I just saw that Dwayne Wade, who's now retired, tweeted at Jimmy Butler, and I didn't think that would actually happen, but it has. So there you go. That's another thing that happened in the NBA. Any comment?
Oh, lots of stuff going on in the NBA. I'm actually kind of surprised that Miami is the selected destination for Jimmy Butler. I think I can't remember exactly what there were a couple other teams interested.
Have you been to Miami?
I have
Jimmy
not been.
likes to have fun.
I might have been to Miami. I used to live in Jacksonville, so but that was when I was like 7, so I'm not really sure if I was in like the party scene when I was in Miami when I was that young. But
so, anyways, okay, back to the Tigers, back to Max Scherzer. Cabrera was sitting out, like I said. That's always a little bit of fun being played. But what happened was it was a close game. So in the 8th inning, or maybe the 9th, Miguel Cabrera pinch hit and actually got an at bat, I think, against Max Scherzer. Scherzer, said it's fun. That's what you want in that moment. You want the best against the best. I think Scherzer had 14 strikeouts, and Miguel Cabrera was one of those. He struck out on 4 pitches. It was a fun little sight to see. And I think the most notable thing that came out of that was in the post-game interview. Scherzer mentioned that the thing he regrets most about his time in Detroit is not bringing a World Series title back. And I think anyone who played on the team that won the AL Central 4 consecutive years feels that way. Something, you saw the way JD Martinez cried and sobbed when he left the Tigers, when he had to move his locker out. I mean, it was heartbreaking for him. He knew he had great things ahead, but it was really tough. It was tough for Justin Verlander to pull the trigger on that trade, but ultimately, one by one, people had to kind of abandon the dream that was that World Series team that Mr. Ilitch kind of inspired in all of us. So it's nice to hear Scherzer recognize that. I think it was nice to get that moment. I don't think anyone should blame Miguel Cabrera for striking out against one of the best pitchers in the planet when, Cabrera is clearly past his prime. So that's just how that goes. They did win the first game against the Nationals, surprisingly, because that really does never happen. I mentioned they only had 5 wins, but they actually got the bats going and scored 7 runs in that game, won 7-5 against the Nationals, and Shane Green got his 22nd save of the season. And that kind of segues me nicely into Shane Green being named an All-Star. Every team has to have one player at least representing them, and Shane Green's going to be the guy. He is, I believe, in the top 3 in the AL in saves with 22. He got his 22 in that 5th win in the month of June for the Tigers. So there's that. other than that, there's really not much going on at the MLB level. The Tigers are doing abysmal. It's just one might ask if they're tanking, because I believe last time I checked they dropped from maybe fifth from the bottom of the list to second to the bottom of the list. So maybe there's someone that they really have their eye on that they think they can't go without. But and it's nothing against the players. The players are trying to win. The players are doing their best, but the front office is setting them up to fail. And that's who you should be mad at is Al Avila. I understand kind of getting a rebuild going, because that's what has to happen. But to do it in such a painful way, it's like it's sadistic, to your fans. To have you watched the movie Major League?
No, I don't think I have.
Okay, well, one of the plots in it, you need to watch that movie. It is classic. But anyways, one of the plots in it, is that one of the owners is trying to get the team to do so poorly that they'll be relocated. So someone made a joke that maybe, Chris Ilitch is trying to do that and Al Avila's in on it too. I hope that's not the case, but it certainly seems like it when you only win 5 games in a month, okay? It's really bad. You're playing 5 to 6 times a week. Win more than one game a week.
That's really poor baseball. I mean,
I get
you're in a rebuild, but for you to only be winning 5 games in a month when you play as much as you do,
the worst part about it is that guys like Shane Green, who's an all-star, and Matthew Boyd, who's a great pitcher, and Nick Castellanos, who's a great hitter, are gonna go. And okay, if you honestly, I understand Boyd, and I understand Green, and I understand Castellanos because of how the rebuild has to go. But to not to have something set up in place to replace that, I mean, can you think of how poorly this team is going to do? I know they've been hit by injuries, but can you imagine how bad this team is going to do if all 3 of those guys get traded over the summer? They're going to have to call up Casey Mize or Riley Green, guys that they've just drafted, guys that should be working their ways up in the minor leagues. I have no idea what we can expect from the Tigers if they do go ahead and execute those trades that we all expect them to do. That being said, Jake Rogers is the catcher for I believe the Mud Hens. I'm pretty sure he's there. He's been hitting really well this season. He's playing in the Futures game. I don't know if anyone else is joining him. I would assume there's someone else, but I haven't heard any other names, so I won't say anything I don't know about. But
I haven't heard anything too much either, but
we've talked a bunch. Jake Rogers is surprising because he's actually one of the guys that I thought that the Tigers should trade for someone a little younger, or maybe one of those players that could play at the MLB level and make things a little more bearable, because I don't think he's exactly the guy that the Tigers want. But then again, I've heard rumors of Grayson Griner, getting traded or something like that. So we'll see exactly what they have to do. But Jake Rogers is hitting well, which is always kind of the knock on him. So we'll see if he moves up. But of course, the names. Casey Mize, outstanding, better than we knew. Riley Green, drafted 5th overall this year. I've talked to his dad, talked to his coaches. He's a great kid. He's going to play for his team. He considers the Tigers organization his family, and he's going to play for the city of Detroit. I have no doubts about him being the centerpiece for the offense in the rebuild for the years to come. But you have the other pitchers, Bo Burrows, Matt Manning, Alex Fado. You have a couple injuries down there, but for the most part, the future does look bright, but the future is 2 to 3 years away. So, there's not much hope for Tigers fans. And, we talked about it. You're not much of a baseball guy, Chase, but, your heart has to break for the city of Detroit because they're going to have to deal with some god-awful baseball over the next few years.
Yeah, it's not going to be the easiest, but, you just have to look forward to the future. That's the biggest thing. I know, I think they could definitely put more effort into the rebuild. I don't really think Avila is necessarily the right guy to be the head of, the rebuild, but at the end of the day, what can you say? I mean, I think anyone can really go in there and, pick a top 5 player. And
yeah, but people are complaining that it's deeper than Avila now. People are complaining that it's Chris Ilitch, that he's complacent, that he doesn't care about this. I don't personally think that. I think that he's an Ilitch. I don't think he's his father, who has the desperate need to win. I think that's something that comes with owning a franchise and being towards the end of your life. No disrespect to him, but that's what I would want if I were, if I were above the age of 60, and I owned a baseball team. That's all I think I would want in my life. So that's, that Chris Ilitch is not that guy. He's not his father. So I don't think he'll sell the team, but I don't think he's, especially going to care if the rebuild takes longer or is a little bit painful. So we'll see how it goes over the next few weeks. Maybe the month of July will be really good for the Tigers. You never know. I like to stay positive about those things, but sometimes they make it really, really hard. Any more thoughts on the Tigers before we move on?
I think that's it. I think that's enough torture for our listeners today.
I know,
to hear
man,
more.
I could groan on about
a bunch
them
of Debbie
all
Downers,
day.
aren't we?
I just get so frustrated with it. But anyways, our fourth story tonight, we're going to talk about some wrestling. I went to a wrestling show last night. I think I've talked about AEW. You know what All Elite Wrestling is, right, Chase?
I've heard of it.
Okay, so if you don't know, All Elite Wrestling is the new competitor for WWE, World Wrestling Entertainment, owned by Vince McMahon. So AEW is owned by Tony Khan. He is the son of Shad Khan, the owner of the Jacksonville Jaguars, so you might be familiar with him. But they're a legitimate big company. They're going to be on TNT in the fall in prime time, so heads up for that, and you all should watch it. At least give it a chance. If you've never watched wrestling before and you have any negative ideas about it, that it's just maybe you think it's goofy or that it's fake fighting or something like that, it is fake fighting and it is pretty goofy, but it's also really fun. So chill out, relax, watch something, and you can watch guys get beat up when they're not actually getting beat up, so you don't have to feel bad about it. What's better than that? You want to watch actual people get hurt? Just sick individual. Anyways so AEW held their second pay-per-view. It was actually not a pay-per-view because you didn't have to pay. It was free on BR Live, TNT's partners streaming service with Bleacher Report. So if you don't have a BR Live account, sign up for that. You can probably watch the recap of it. I'm not sure if you can see me, but I'm sitting to the right of the hard cam behind the ring a little bit up. So look for me. I'll post a screen cap of it later. But AEW had Fyter Fest. It's a play on the Fyre Festival. I'm sure you've heard of that, right, Chase?
Yeah, I'm hoping it turned out better than the Fyre Festival.
It was, but they kept pretending like it was a disaster and cutting, promos, which are little videos, on the screen or in the ring and stuff, talking about how this was a disaster. They had 4 very beautiful models, very beautiful, in bikinis with those big, glamping tents, right? Glamorous camping tents. They had those out there, and they kind of did a couple of skits with that and tore the tents up, and then they said they were over budget, so they couldn't afford all 4 of those models, so 2 of them had to go. So 2 of them left, waved goodbye, and they put out mannequins, and we all cheered for the mannequins. It was really fun.
It was like a blast, and I know you got to experience that firsthand, so I'm sure that was an awesome event, celebrating your birthday for that, so I'm sure that it was pretty exciting.
Yeah.
Pretty cool show there, I'm sure.
So it was super. I won't go too much into it because this isn't a wrestling podcast, but I think we will have a wrestling podcast eventually. But,
what matches?
The main events were Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks, who are 2 of the Young Bucks are probably the most popular tag team in the country, and Kenny Omega is one of the biggest stars in Japan, and he should become one of the biggest stars in America now that he's in AEW and will be on TNT. But people love him, and he's really good. It was at a CEO Gaming tournament type conference thing, so they had a kind of like a Street Fighter video game costume. They did like a triple Hadouken. It was really funny, but it was cool. And they fought the Lucha Brothers, Penta El Cero Miedo, and Rey Fenix with Laredo Kid, which was really impressive. Again, all 3 of those guys, obviously, as you can tell, they are Mexican, they are luchadors, and they wear masks, okay? But they're really, really fun, and they're little, and they're flippy, and they did some amazing things that I will post videos of later. But, it was a really cool experience to watch guys just jump off ropes and flip and crash into each other and stuff like that. And if you do end up checking out this wrestling show, and you don't have all the time in the world and you don't want to believe me that it's great, but you're going to listen to me anyways because you're a nice person, I recommend that you check out that one, the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega versus the Lucha Brothers and Laredo Kid. The other one that I recommend you watching, if you do have a little more time on your hands, is the last match on the show, Jon Moxley and Joey Janela. Okay, you probably don't know who Joey Janela is, but you might know who Jon Moxley is, right?
Yeah, I'm familiar with Jon Moxley.
Jon Moxley is the former Dean Ambrose of WWE. He left WWE at the end of April. He got a big farewell because Vince didn't really know what was going on, Vince McMahon, the owner of WWE. And he showed up at AEW's first pay-per-view at the end and shocked the entire world as his old character / new character, Jon Moxley. So Jon Moxley's kind of this really tough individual who's gritty and will do anything and, basically will kill. I mean, he doesn't care. So, and Joey Janela is an internet goofball. I mean, he does absolutely anything. He, probably the biggest thing he's most famous for is like jumping off a building into a truck with like light tubes and a bunch of other crap in it that was also on fire. So, you get the idea of what these guys are into. So they had an unsanctioned match, which meant there were no rules. They had barbed wire tables, they had barbed wire chairs, they had thumbtacks. They slammed each other in. They were bloody. They got cut up. It's not for everyone, but if you're into that kind of stuff, it's definitely the sort of thing I recommend you check out, especially because it was Jon Moxley's debut. And it gives you a taste for, if you've ever watched WWE and maybe you stopped watching it because it was stupid, because it is stupid, check this out, because this is not WWE now. Tony Khan has said that this isn't the kind of thing that you're going to see on TNT, because TNT is, it's public television, you know what I mean? You can't put that stuff on television, but you can put it on a pay-per-view, especially one like this that was streamed for free. So I definitely recommend you check it out. BR Live, sign up. They're going to have all the other pay-per-views on there available for purchase, and I'm pretty sure that's the only way you can get them in the United States anyways. So unless you go to the show, you should definitely sign up and check those out. The other thing I kind of wanted to talk about bleeds into this whole AEW thing is that WWE is getting scared. They've named 2 new executive directors, Paul Heyman and Eric Bischoff. Do you know either of those names, Chase?
Yeah, for sure. I know who those guys are. I mean, those are some of the biggest names.
Exactly. So if you paid, you don't have to know anything about wrestling for the past 10 years, 8 years. But if you paid attention to wrestling 20 years ago when it was in its heyday, Paul Heyman was the ECW guy and Eric Bischoff was the WCW guy. And now they're both executive directors for Vince McMahon. They report directly to Vince McMahon. Heyman runs Raw, Bischoff runs SmackDown, which means Bischoff will be dealing directly with Fox, but Fox does not exactly want to deal with Bischoff. Now, it's not to say that they don't like Bischoff, but they may feel that Heyman is the better guy, and that Heyman is the better guy. He's been working in the creative department with Vince for several years. He's older, so the problems that he had in the past aren't necessarily going to be really a problem anymore. So, the feeling by Fox that they wanted the more practiced guy, I understand that. But at the same time, Eric Bischoff speaks executive, That was one thing, that Turner liked when he was doing WCW in the early 2000s. He could talk to them. He knew their language. He knew how all of the, stuff worked that necessarily, a wrestling promoter might not know, I'm sure Paul Heyman's savvy and that he would be great for the job, but I think Eric Bischoff will do fine too. But this is clearly a reaction to AEW doing stuff. They don't want to lose these guys, so they're putting them there. They're also trying to get an Emmy Award. And I believe to have an Emmy Award, you need some sort of credits that say, executive producers, executive directors. So this could have something to do with that. I have no idea how long it'll last. I have no idea if it'll affect the program, but it is a reaction nonetheless from WWE because of things like Jon Moxley going to AEW. So, and meanwhile, WWE's top guy, Seth Rollins, is feuding with New Japan's top guy, Will Ospreay. They're fighting on Twitter, and the funny part is Seth Rollins is coming off like a huge D-bag. He doesn't sound good. He sounds like he's bullying this other guy who's clearly better than him, Seth Rollins is a great wrestler, but he's not Will Ospreay. And if you haven't watched a Will Ospreay match, look up Will Ospreay and Ricochet New Japan or something like that. It might not be New Japan, but I think it is. So you got turmoil on one hand, and you got a really fun show that I went to last night on the other hand. So things might be worth checking into if you're not a wrestling fan and you need something to fill up some time, because there's certainly loads and loads of content for you to make your own opinion. And I think that wrestling is the best it's been in 10 years. So definitely check it out. Our fifth story tonight is the Detroit Red Wings. Chase, what is going on with them?
So the Detroit Red Wings just got done with the development camp, and I think that's definitely interesting, especially after the draft. There's always some exciting guys that you want to watch after development camp. We got to see, for the first time, we got to get our first look at Moritz Seider, the first round draft pick from 2019, the Detroit Red Wings, and honestly, he looks really good. If you guys are subscribers to The Athletic, this afternoon on the Red Wings podcast to Max Boltman of The Athletic, and gave us some insight on some of his thoughts. He was there at development camp and said that Moritz Seider looked really good. The kid skating is really good. I mean, he's got really good hockey IQ, and his offensive potential is really good as well. I mean, he scored a couple goals during development camp, and he looked really good. Honestly, he looks poised to make the main roster in the next couple of years. He's got the potential to be a top pair defenseman alongside Phil Peronik, potentially on the main roster. So that's really exciting for the Red Wings. So that's definitely something to look forward to if you guys want to. There's definitely on the Red Wings website, redwings.com. You guys can go back and watch the 3-versus-3 tournament as well as the red versus white scrimmage. If you guys haven't looked at those, I definitely recommend them. Two really good games. You got to see a lot into, some of the Red Wings prospects, and you saw some interesting performances there. Like I said, I mentioned Moritz Seider had a really good performance. Tar Hiroshi, if you guys paid attention last season, played a couple games with the Red Wings. He had a really good development camp as well. Scored a couple goals, scored a really nice shootout goal as well. And then Joe Veleno, first-round draft pick from 2018 in the 30th overall pick. He also scored a couple goals, again, had a really nice shootout goal, and just had an overall really good development camp. There's a good chance that he has a shot to make the main roster next season. So yeah, that's definitely big there. Someone also from the first round of the 2018 draft who we actually didn't get to see is Filip Zadina. He had a hamstring injury that kept him out of development camp. I think he skated around a little bit, but he did not participate in drills and did not participate in any of the scrimmages that happened. So unfortunately, we did not get to see a lot of him. I was really looking forward to seeing Zadina on the ice and seeing what he has to bring forward in his second year at camp. But unfortunately, we weren't able to see that. I know there's some kind of mixed feelings about whether Zadina will make the main roster next year. I know Free Press's Helene St. James thinks that he will not contend for a roster spot next year. He just doesn't think that, he's had enough success in the AHL yet to, make the main roster next year, which I think personally is a little bit ridiculous. But that's definitely interesting there. I think he definitely does compete for a roster spot. I don't know if he starts there, but he'll play most of the season next year with the Red Wings. Another injury that happened was actually during development camp was the Red Wings' second-round pick from 2019, Robert. Unfortunately, ended up breaking his ankle blocking a shot. So his timetable for returns on 4 to 6 weeks. But I think that's a big blow. I think he's a really great value for what they got in the second round. I was really looking forward to seeing him in the next couple seasons.
What's
Not
his
that
name
he'll.
again?
Astra Simone. He's got quite a last name.
Astra Simone, quite a name.
Yes,
I
but
think you
yeah,
cut out during part of it, so I didn't hear all of it, and I heard just the Oni, and I was like, what?
yeah, Robert Master Simone. I'm telling you guys, if you guys are Red Wings fans, pay attention to that name. I feel like you'll see him in the next couple seasons. He's a really good right winger, good shots, great skating. Like I said,
think I
definitely
prefer
steal.
the left wingers.
But the kid, I feel like is going to be really good. I think they definitely capitalized on defense, but he was one of the bright spots on offense at camp until he broke his ankle. So unfortunate there. He probably won't play for the Red Wings at all next season, so I don't think his injury necessarily, affects his chances of, making the roster because he probably wasn't going to contend anyways, but it definitely puts him behind in his development. Injuries are never good. You don't like to see that for a young kid, especially an 18-year-old. Injuries that early in your career are definitely not a good start. So, but hopefully he can kind of recover from that. But yeah, unfortunately, that kind of stuff just happens, and you have to get over it. And you build and you get stronger. It's
He's
a tough
young,
break
so
for
he'll bounce back faster than if he were older. So that's always, I guess, the silver lining there. We're talking about things that we can look back on and things that are just happening. Obviously, what if I'm a Red Wings fan, or if I'm a potential Red Wings fan who's looking to get into hockey before the season starts? What do I have to look forward to next? The draft is over. What am I looking for?
So you guys are entering into the free agency period, so you're going to see a lot of movement, I think, go around. I don't know necessarily how involved the Red Wings will be, but I think it's definitely something to at least look out for. Maybe the Red Wings bring a guy or two in. Looking at goalie free agent Calvin Pickard as a potential, competitive he's competing for the job, I should say, for the backup job with Jonathan Bernier on the main roster. I don't really think he'll necessarily contend, but I think it's definitely an interesting thought with Rybar going back to Europe, so he'll no longer be with the Grand Rapids Griffins. So I think Pickard could fit well into sort of Grand Rapids role, a possibility. That's definitely possible there. But like I said, I don't think they'll be super I don't think they'll be super active in free agency, but
the offseason is pretty slow.
Very slow process. I think you're going to see a lot like the Tigers. It's going to be a little bit tough to watch the Red Wings next season. I think they'll be a good team. I think you'll see guys like
tough to watch them this season, wasn't it?
It was tough to watch them this season, but I think I think fans should look forward to seeing a lot more of Philip Zadina. You'll see more
of If you're a fan of the game and you understand how the rebuild works, you can appreciate it, because I think the Red Wings are doing a better job rebuilding than the Tigers are right now. I think they have some bearable players to watch where the Tigers don't necessarily. So, like you said, keep your eyes on Zadina. I think he will be with the Red Wings for most of the year, like you said. And, he'll be fun to watch, right? It's fun to watch the future. You remember when Justin Verlander came up when he was really young? Like, it was like, oh, this is it. This is the next thing. He's the guy. So, that potential is always there and always fun. But it is a relatively slow time for the, hockey season. We don't have much news to report. You got anything else on the Red Wings?
I think that's it. So if you guys want to go back and watch camp, the camp, it's still up on their website. But other than that, I think that wraps up for the news with the Red Wings.
All right. You got any entertainment news to talk about before we wrap things up tonight? Do you see any good movies or any good stuff?
I'm trying to think. I watched that one show, the show you told me about last week, the Holy Moly show. And I had an absolute ball with that. I thought that was really
no pun intended.
That was a lot of fun to watch. But I haven't really seen a whole lot of good stuff on Netflix. I've been enjoying a couple of TV shows. If you guys are interested in Designated Survivor by chance, I think that's I've kept my eyes on. So the premise of Designated Survivor is essentially that this guy who serves as I think he's a senator, or he serves some form of government. There's actually is a position in the United States called the Designated Survivor. So when they do a big, where Congress meets and they have the president give the, State of the Union speech, everyone's obviously there. And in case of some sort of massive disaster, they have someone who stays behind in a secure location, and they're known as the Designated Survivor.
Oh, yeah.
Essentially, this character, played by Kiefer Sutherland, he's a great actor, is serving as the Designated Survivor, and there is a terrorist attack on the White House, or I think just at a Capitol building, I believe it is, and it kills the president and tons of people, and he basically gets thrown into the presidency.
Wow.
And has to adapt. It's a very exciting show.
Where can I watch it?
You can go back and watch it. The first 2 seasons are on ABC, but I don't think ABC picked it up for a 3rd season. So the first 2 seasons are TV 14 because it was on TV on ABC.
But they're not on Netflix?
All 3 seasons are on Netflix. The
All
third
3
season
seasons are on Netflix. Great.
third season was picked up by a different program. It's actually a mature rating, so they're actually you see a lot of just say more vulgar just language, I think, in the show. I don't really think it's necessarily more inappropriate, I guess, but I think honestly, if it's a show that's worth watching, it's so good. I really enjoy it. There's in the first couple seasons, there's so many plot twists, and it's crazy. Honestly, that show is an emotional roller coaster in terms of just twists, and the plot is incredible. The story making is really, really good. So I think if you guys are interested in a show like that, I think it's only like 12 episode seasons, so they're not super long. It's not a show that you have to get super invested into. You can finish it in a couple weeks, and I think
like
it's definitely or a day, depending on how you how you watch your
Everyone
Netflix.
binge
You could
watches, admit it.
trust me, if this is a binge watching show. Every single episode in the first couple of seasons will leave you on the edge.
On Netflix.
Yep, it will leave you on the edge. Check it out. What about you? Is there any shows or movies you've been watching?
Yeah, okay, so I'm late to the party here. I'm watching 2 things. One, okay, so I was home for my birthday, and I watched shows with my mom because, I'm not going to be home and not hang out with my mom, and we like the same kind of television, so that's the perfect thing to do. So she turned me on to The West Wing. Now, we watched the entire West Wing, which if you've never watched it, is the best show of all time, and you should just go watch it. I'm not going to tell you what it's about. Just go watch it. If you don't like it, we're not friends. But it was written by Aaron Sorkin, or created by Aaron Sorkin, who I think is absolutely brilliant. So over the weekend, I was watching a new Aaron Sorkin show, not brand new. It's come and go. It's over by now, but it's an HBO series called Newsroom. A bunch of you have probably seen the scene where the main character tells everyone that America is not the greatest country on the planet anymore. So it's political. It's for sure political, and it's a little more left leaning, as a lot of television tends to kind of be. But it's a really good show. It's a really smart and quick show. So it's good. It's HBO. So you need like HBO Go or HBO Now, or you can steal your friends like everyone else does on the planet. But definitely recommend checking that one out. So I kind of watched that over the weekend. But what I watched at the beginning of the week, and I have been on an absolute tear. I mean, in the past 2 weeks, I've maybe watched 4 or 5 seasons of this show, and a bunch of people have told me to watch it in the past, and a bunch of people have watched it in the past. But Criminal Minds is absolutely fantastic. It is so, so good. I'm not a procedural crime drama show guy, but this one is so good. They get into the unknown subject, usually someone who's committing serial murders, or sometimes it's something else wacky, but it has to do with lots of sexual assault and things like that. But they catch bad guys, and they understand how they work. It's the behavioral analysis unit of the FBI, and it's just such a I don't want to say fun because they're dealing with murderers, but it's so it keeps you on the edge of your seat, kind of like the one you were describing. So those are the 2 shows that I'm really into right now. And I love our little entertainment talks because they always stall to give us enough time to make this a good hour. So with that, that's our little entertainment piece. Chase, tell the people where they can find you. I know you talked about the Hockeytown Rundown, so let them know where that's at on Twitter and where they can find you.
Yeah, so you guys can find the Hockeytown Rundown at HockeyTWN on Twitter. Like I said, look out for a new episode. I kind of leaked it a little bit earlier, so hopefully this episode doesn't drop before the Hockeytown Rundown. But we interviewed Max Boltman, which is a little bit of a secret, but it's not a secret anymore. I think from The Athletic, if you guys pay attention to that, you guys are subscribers to The Athletic. If you're not, you absolutely should be. They have a deal right now. I think that's 50% off.
Most importantly, you're bringing up the subscription. Most importantly, the Hockeytown Rundown does not require a subscription. You are getting this content for free.
Yeah, absolutely. You guys are getting this content for free. You guys are getting this inside interview with Max Boltman for free. So be sure to check that out. That'll be up in the next couple of days. So definitely look out. We just covered the draft. So any big Red Wings fans, be sure to tune into that. You don't even have to be a Red Wings fan to tune in, honestly. Just listen, because I think it's interesting content. It's a lot of fun. If you're looking to get into it, I think it's definitely a good start. It's definitely a good way to sort of segue into the world of hockey. So if you guys are interested in that, go ahead and listen. You guys can also find me personally on Twitter at Chase Sussex, Chase Sussex on Twitter. You guys can shoot me questions over there. Ask me about how the interview was, or just ask me whatever you guys want to watch. Tell me how much you guys love Designated Survivor over there. I would love to talk about it with you guys. So feel free to shoot me a message over there on Twitter.
All right, and as always, make sure that you're following our main sites, Twitter, MichiganSportsAndEntertainment.com. On Twitter, that's at MichSportsN, at MICHSportsENT. Make sure you're following us here at the MSE Countdown, at MSE Countdown on Twitter. We thank you so much for listening to us today. We hope you enjoyed the program, and we'll be back next week on Monday. We're on a schedule, folks, so you can expect that from us. We will be here every Monday for the foreseeable future. So make sure that you're sending those tweets in to at MSE Countdown. I think our DMs are open, so you can DM us if you don't like to do things in public. But we like to talk. We like to retweet. We like to have conversations and talk to you guys. So make sure you, conversate with us. And then, of course, you guys can find me, your host, David Rosenberg, on Twitter, at David Rosenberg, BERGG, 2 Gs, because someone stole my original handle, and I will find them and hunt them down until I can get it back. But until then, thanks so much for listening, and we'll talk to you again after a while.